Matt Freund, great to have you with us. Calamos Advisors, Head of Fixed Income Strategies and Co-CIO. There is a hope, Matt, that we can engineer a soft landing. What's a soft landing, and can we engineer one?
So I think we absolutely can engineer a soft landing. I think that my definition is where growth moderates, where the Fed's objectives of keeping inflation under control, keeping employment high, are met. And I think we're on that path. The wild cards, though, are all of the global soap operas that you were talking about and Fed policy itself. Are they going to overdo it? And so far, we don't think they have.
Any signs of something evolving that would encourage the Federal Reserve to come back in and pull a 180 in the way they've pulled a 180 over the last couple of months?
Well, I think people have really misunderstood what the Fed did. I think the Fed did the right thing in December. They raised rates. The market was expecting a hike sometimes in December or January. Where they got it wrong was the communication afterwards. And I think we're at a stage now where if risk assets continue to do well, if the economy here domestically gets some traction, I think it's quite possible that the Fed will be back raising rates later in the year. If that doesn't happen, I think we're going to see a long pause.
You had such a long history in the business, and then you joined this magnificent Calamos out of Illinois, out of Chicago, Naperville, and all that. And you guys own what I'm going to call the early derivative terrain of fixed income, synthetic things and goofy things, if you will, within fixed income. You guys are decades out in front on all that.
John Calamos wrote the book.
He wrote the book on this. He literally invented the book, folks, on some of the odd things in fixed income. Is it a full faith in credit market, which is what we quote all the time, or our listeners, are they missing a true yield opportunity away from government paper?
So I think they absolutely are. One of the messages that we try to give is that it is not just one bond market. It is a market of bonds. And in any given day, there are sectors that we like and we think have opportunity. There's sectors that are overvalued and that we think you want to
start with the overvalued. Where does our audience need to run from right now?
So I think the biggest question marks in my mind are the weaker part of the investment grade market. We've seen tremendous growth there. A lot of companies issuing debt to buy back stock. We think that there's potentially a lot of problems there when the market.
So you're going to quality is the opportunity.
Well, so it's really a barbelled approach, because I think on the other side, the high yield market gets tarnished in this whole credit problem. High yield has been very well behaved. There's a handful of deals that we don't like, that maybe the covenants were too far, but really the high yield market is also still healthy.
Well, let's talk about the dividing line between investment grade and high yield. Triple Bs and double Bs. That spread is as tight as it has been for the last decade. What's the story in the price action and that spread right now?
Yeah, so I would tell you that it's hard to speak in large generalities, and here's why. You can find single B bonds that are much tighter than double Bs. You can find investment grade wider than double Bs or single Bs, and so it's really name specific and sector specific. What I guide you to is that well-known names, decent liquidity, good business plans, those are still relative, in our mind, very attractive 3 to 5 years. It's some of the esoteric stuff where you can get into
Well, let's go into the triple Bs and go a bit deeper, maybe sector-specific, maybe even company-specific, if you'll allow us to go there. There is a concern that a lot of those companies have massive debt loads, that leverage has been picking up, and they're going to drop down into high yield, into junk, fallen angels.
Right.
That's sitting on this market, this big concern, the triple B universe, which has become bigger and bigger and bigger. Can the C-suite engineer a turnaround where they can defend their credit rating? Are you hopeful that can happen? And where are you hopeful that is happening?
So I think that the message went out last year in the second half that this idea that you can borrow forever to buy back stock is a strategy that you need to rein in a little bit. And we think that we're seeing that. So I think...
Right. No, continue.
No, so your point's really a good one, and we think that activity is going to soften, and we think that for on the equity side, you heard Doug before. I mean, that's a source of buying that I don't think is going to be there until balance sheets are repaired. The rough math. So the triple B market, the weak triple B market, is about 2 times the high yield market, and about half of that, 40 to 50% of that, has what used to be, when I started in the business, high yield statistics from leverage.
Wow, that's actually some really important math. I'm going to suggest John Kalamos did not invent the loan market, the senior loan. John, what was the uproar last year? Peak of the market, everybody couldn't sell this stuff fast enough.
Leverage loans?
Leverage loans, that's
right.
it. I mean, your thoughts on what everybody was talking about 6 months ago? Is it all clear?
So I think leverage loans can be a very attractive investment. Going from high yield to leverage loans could make sense.
Why?
So leverage loans are generally top of the credit stack. So they're going to get paid back first. To the extent that there are covenants, they generally have them. And they're a floating rate instrument if you're worried about rates still going up. The problem is going to be the people who are stretching from the investment grade space going into loans, because it can have a very different return characteristic. So it's de-risking from the high yield side, but it's taking more risk.
But you have to be so active about doing this.
You do.
And I'll say why, Tom, and I think this is really important. We often hear a lot of people say, this is secured, you're higher up in the capital structure. That's great, so long as you've got something beneath you. The worry is in leverage loans is there are so many loan-only companies now where you think you are up in the capital structure, but you're it because there's nothing below you.
Yeah, so you have to turn around and see if there's anybody back of you in the line, and that's absolutely right. So that's a newer development, and that's something that we're very cautious in.
You're very cautious in that.
So when I say cautious, so it's name specific, but you don't.
So basically, you're saying don't buy the index. Don't buy some passive fund that tracks.
You do not want to index high yield or loans. It's idiosyncratic. There are sectors to like and not like.
Let's do some math. How much yield can we pick up with a Kalamos approach off of what the perceived yield is of the market? Because I think people don't realize they can pick up more than 50 basis points, half a percentage point of yield.
Oh, sure. So the high yield market today is yielding 7.25, depending on the yield. We generally yield a little bit more than that. We take a very bond by bond approach. So more like 7.5. You have to deduct fees. So right now today, after fees, you're probably talking something in the mid sixes that we can give. The great news here is that you don't have a lot of duration if you're worried about that.
Where's the duration point? Because if we're picking up 300 basis points, right?
Yeah. So the duration of the high yield market is generally a 3 to 4 year sort of market.
John, I think that's the number one thing about the Real Yield tomorrow on Bloomberg Television. People think high yield is 20-year paper.
Do you want to come to the editorial meeting?
No, I don't need to come to the editorial
the shorter
meeting.
duration
I've never been invited.
The shorter duration of high yield really helped the market last year.
It sure did. And then on the other part, the duration of the investment grade market is the longest that it's almost ever been.
Right.
I always go back to 89 because that's when I started in the business, and it's almost never been longer than it is today.
Are you going to be here tomorrow?
No, actually, I'm flying back.
He's done a show before. He is a guest of Bloomberg Radio.
That was so brilliant. I emailed McKinnon, who does all of our social media, and said, please put Matt Freund out in the podcast today.
It's my pleasure.
Was a clinic. That was folks, if that's what this is all about, is talking to people that really inform and advance the dialogue. Matt Freund with Kalamos of Chicago and of Illinois. Definitive Bond House.